He said it at the reception, not in private, not in a corner somewhere, away from the casseroles and the folding chairs and the 37 people who had come to sit with us in the fellowship hall of First Calvary Baptist on a Thursday afternoon in November. He said it right there, in the middle of all of it, with his arms around me and his voice low against my ear, the specific register a son uses when he wants something to feel like a promise. "I'll take care of everything, Dad." I had just buried my wife of 44 years. I was 69 years old, and I was standing in a room full of people who loved Margaret, and I was wearing the gray suit she had picked out for my retirement dinner in 2019, because she said it made me look distinguished, and I had never had reason to buy another good suit since, and I was wearing it now to put her in the ground. My son had his arms around me, and he said he would take care of everything, and I believed him, the way a man believes things when he is too hollowed out by grief to interrogate them. 3 days later, I walked into First Meridian Bank on Glenwood Avenue in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the branch manager, a woman named Sandra Osei who had managed that branch for 11 years and who had handled my accounts since I opened them in 2009, looked at me across the lobby, and something in her face changed. She did not wave from her desk the way she usually did. She walked toward me. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, can you come with me, please?" And the way she said please, careful, contained, the specific tone of a professional who is holding something that requires a private room, told me before I took a single step that the 3 days since Margaret's funeral had not been what I thought they were. My name is James Caldwell. I am 69 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil rights attorney in Raleigh, North Carolina, trying cases that most firms would not touch, and winning enough of them to matter. I retired in 2020. Margaret and I had been planning for the retirement the way careful people plan for things, steadily, over decades, building something that was supposed to hold us through the years on the other side of work. Margaret did not make it to those years. And the morning Sandra Osei pulled me into a private room and turned her monitor toward me, I understood that the thing we had built together, 44 years of careful, disciplined, intentional building, had been reached into while I was standing in a fellowship hall believing a whispered promise. This is the story of what I did about it. But first I need to tell you who my son is, and who Margaret was, and what it means to build something with a person for 44 years, and then stand at a bank manager's monitor on a Tuesday morning and watch it become a number that should not be possible. Margaret Louise Caldwell, née Harper, was 67 years old when she passed. Breast cancer, diagnosed in the spring, gone by November, 7 months. She spent the first 3 fighting and the last 4 deciding how she wanted the remaining time to look, which was exactly the kind of decision Margaret would make. The specific choice of a woman who had spent her entire adult life understanding that the quality of a thing mattered more than its duration. She had been a school principal. 32 years in Wake County Public Schools, the last 14 as principal of Millbrook Elementary, where she was the kind of administrator who knew every child by name and every family by situation, and who operated on the foundational belief that a school is only as strong as the trust the neighborhood places in it. She ran the house the same way she ran the school, with clarity, warmth, and the particular brand of high expectation that communicates itself not through pressure, but through the steady assumption that the people around you are capable of more than they are currently doing. She ran our finances, not because I couldn't, but because she was better at it, and we both knew it, and I had the sense to acknowledge it early in the marriage and never revisit the question. She kept the records, managed the accounts, tracked the investments, and reviewed the statements every month with the focused attention of a woman who had learned from her grandmother that the difference between comfort and catastrophe is usually a piece of paper somebody did not read. When she was diagnosed, one of the first things she did was sit with me at the kitchen table and walk me through everything. Every account, every password, every policy, every contact, the attorney, the financial advisor, the insurance broker. She did it with the same methodical calm she had used to plan school budgets, and she did it without either of us saying directly what the exercise was for, because we did not need to say it directly. She also, without telling me until the last week of her life, called our attorney and updated something. I found out what she had updated the morning Sandra Osei turned her monitor toward me. Our son's name is Marcus. He is 43 years old. He lives in Durham, 22 miles from Raleigh, in a house he purchased in 2018 with his wife Deja and their 2 children, my grandchildren Zora, who is 9, and Eli, who is 6. Marcus is intelligent, professionally accomplished. He worked his way through a master's program in finance at NC State while working full-time, and he has spent the 14 years since building a career in investment management that by every external measure reflects well on him and on the upbringing that produced him. He is also a man who has, over the course of his adult life, developed a relationship with money that I can only describe as hungry. Not desperate. Hungry is different from desperate. Desperate is reactive. Hungry is patient. Hungry watches. Hungry waits for the right moment, and then moves with the specific confidence of someone who has been calculating the move for much longer than anyone realized. I had seen the hunger in small ways over the years. In the questions he asked about the retirement accounts when he thought he was asking casually. In the way he referenced the house value after the Raleigh market began doing things to property values that none of us had anticipated when we bought on Meadow Creek Drive in 1996. In the conversations he had with Margaret in her final weeks, that she mentioned to me once, with a careful expression that told me she had heard something in those conversations that she had not yet decided how to name. She named it, I believe, in the document she updated with our attorney. I did not know that yet on the day we buried her. I knew it 3 days later, in Sandra Osei's private room, on a Tuesday morning, that I had planned to spend going through Margaret's desk. Sandra closed the door behind us. The private room at First Meridian Bank on Glenwood Avenue is a small space. A table, 4 chairs, a monitor on an articulated arm that can be rotated to face a client. Quiet, removed from the lobby noise. The kind of room used for conversations that require privacy, because what is being discussed cannot be overheard without consequence. Sandra sat across from me. She folded her hands on the table. She had the expression of a woman who has been a professional for long enough to maintain composure in difficult circumstances, and who is maintaining it now, at some effort. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "I want to show you something, and I need you to look at it carefully, and then tell me if you authorize these transactions." She turned the monitor. There were 4 of them. 4 wire transfers, executed between 11:47 in the morning and 2:18 in the afternoon on Thursday, November 9th, the day of Margaret's funeral, the day we stood at Glenwood Memorial Cemetery in the November cold and put her in the ground, and then drove to First Calvary Baptist for the reception, where my son put his arms around me and made a promise. 4 transfers, each one from a different account, the joint checking account Margaret and I had maintained since 1987, the individual savings account in my name that held the emergency reserve we had built over 3 decades, the money market account our financial advisor had structured in 2015, and the certificate of deposit we had opened in 2018 as the last piece of the retirement architecture Margaret had designed for us. The total across all 4 accounts was not a number I am going to put in this story, because some things belong to the specific privacy of what they cost, and not to public accounting. What I will tell you is that the number represented 44 years of 2 people working and saving and deferring and building with the patient intention of people who understood that the life on the other side of work required a foundation, and that the foundation had taken 4 decades to lay. Every dollar of it was gone. I looked at the screen for a long time. Sandra did not speak. She understood that what she had just shown me required space that she was not going to fill with words. Then I looked up. "Who authorized these?" My voice came out level. 31 years of courtroom practice. The voice that does not waver when wavering would cost you everything. Sandra's expression did not change, but something in it tightened. The authorizations were processed using your login credentials and your security answers. The IP address on the transfers traces to a device that is not on your registered device list. Not my device. Sandra. I kept my voice exactly where it was. I need you to tell me what the receiving accounts were. She turned the monitor slightly, showed me the transfer destinations. 4 accounts at 2 different institutions, both in the name of a holding company registered in Delaware. I did not know the company name, but I knew the name of one of its registered agents because Margaret's attorney had mentioned it once in a context I had not then understood. The registered agent was my son. I sat in that private room on a Tuesday morning 3 days after my wife's funeral, and I looked at the screen, and I thought about the arms around me in the fellowship hall, and the voice low against my ear, and the words spoken in the register of a promise. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. Before I go any further, I need to stop here. If you are watching this right now, and something in the last few minutes has landed somewhere specific in you, if there is a name in your life that this story is calling up, a transaction you noticed but did not know how to interpret, a promise made at the wrong moment by someone who should have known better, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight. Your city, your country. I want to know who is out here. And press that like button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next on this channel. Now let me tell you about the phone call and about what Margaret had done without telling me. My attorney's name is Franklin Greer. He has had a practice on Fayetteville Street in Raleigh for 28 years. We have been friends since law school, which means he has known me through every significant event of my adult life, including the ones I would prefer to have navigated with more dignity than I managed. He answered on the second ring. James. I told him where I was. I told him what Sandra had shown me. I gave him the number. I gave him the company name and the name of the registered agent. Franklin was quiet for 4 seconds. In 28 years, I have learned to read his silences the way other people read facial expressions. 4 seconds is the silence of a man absorbing something he is simultaneously unsurprised by and deeply disturbed about. A longer silence would mean he was calculating. 4 seconds meant he had already begun. James, he said, I need to tell you something. Margaret called me in October. October. 6 weeks before she passed. During the weeks she had described to me as the planning weeks, the weeks of the kitchen table conversations, and the account passwords, and the insurance contacts. She had called Franklin in October, and she had asked him to update something, not her will, something else, something she had apparently been thinking about for longer than October, which meant she had seen something in Marcus's behavior during those final months that had resolved a question she had been carrying, and had decided, with the specific efficiency of a woman who understood that she did not have unlimited time, to act on the answer. She put a restriction on the joint account, Franklin said, a dual authorization requirement for any transfer above a certain threshold. She also moved a significant portion of the retirement assets into a separate structure that I administer. She moved them, before she died, into a structure Franklin administered, away from the accounts Marcus had emptied on the day of her funeral. How much? I asked. Franklin named a figure. It was more than the 4 accounts Marcus had reached into, considerably more, because Margaret had not moved everything. She had moved the most significant portion, the part that represented the real foundation. The 4 accounts Marcus had emptied were real, and the loss was real, and we were going to address it fully. But Margaret had already understood that someone might try to reach into the architecture she had built, and she had built a wall around the part that mattered most before she was gone. I sat in Sandra Osei's private room with my phone pressed to my ear, and I thought about my wife sitting at a kitchen table in October, walking me through account passwords and policy numbers, while simultaneously, without telling me, calling Franklin Greer and moving the most important piece somewhere no one could reach without going through him first. She had protected us, from her hospital bed, in the planning weeks, while I was sitting across from her at the kitchen table thinking we were doing the hard work of saying goodbye to everything we had built together, while I was writing down account passwords in the notebook she handed me, and asking clarifying questions about the insurance policies, and trying to hold it together across the table from the woman who had been my entire architecture for 44 years. She had been doing a second thing simultaneously. A thing she had decided not to tell me about because she understood. The way Margaret always understood things about me before I understood them myself. That if she told me what she was doing, and why she was doing it, the conversation would become about Marcus, and about what she had seen in Marcus's behavior in those final months, and about the grief of a mother who loves her son, and has recognized something in him that she cannot fix, and does not have enough time left to address directly. So she handled it the way she handled every complicated thing, quietly, precisely, without requiring anyone's permission or participation. She called Franklin. She moved the money. She built the wall. And then she sat back down across from me at the kitchen table and continued walking me through the account passwords, as if the most important thing she was going to do that week was make sure I had the right phone number for the insurance broker. I had spent 44 years thinking I was the attorney in this family. Margaret had been practicing a different kind of law the whole time, the kind with no bar exam and no courtroom and no opposing counsel, the kind that requires everything a bar exam requires and more, which is the knowledge of specific people well enough to see around the corners they cannot see around themselves. She had seen around mine. She had been building a wall. "Franklin," I said. "Yes." "How fast can you move?" "I've been ready since October," he said. What happened in the 72 hours following Sandra's private room is the kind of sequence that feels, in the telling, like it moved quickly. In the living of it, it moved the way structural failures move when the load finally exceeds what the weakest point was designed to hold. Fast in some places, agonizingly suspended in others, and in between, the specific silence of a man waiting for things he has set in motion to reach their destinations. Franklin filed a civil complaint against Marcus Caldwell and Meridian Holdings LLC, the Delaware company, on Tuesday afternoon. The complaint alleged unauthorized access, wire fraud, and breach of fiduciary trust. It named the 4 receiving accounts. It included Sandra Osei's documented records of the transfers. It included the IP address data. It included the registered agent filing that connected Marcus to the company. Franklin also contacted the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is the federal body that tracks wire fraud, and provided preliminary notification. He did not wait for a response before filing the civil complaint, because Franklin Greer does not wait when waiting costs more than moving. On Wednesday morning, Franklin called me at 7:15. "Marcus has an attorney," he said. "I expected this. He retained Paul Whitman yesterday evening. Whitman called me at 6 this morning." A pause. He described the situation as a family financial matter that had been mischaracterized. Mischaracterized. I let the words sit in the air of the kitchen where Margaret's teapot was still on the stove, and her reading glasses were still on the counter next to the crossword she had been working on the week before. She was admitted for the last time. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him to look at the IP address data and the company registration timestamp and call me back when he was ready to have a different conversation." Franklin had been my attorney for 28 years. He had also been my friend since we were 24 years old studying for the bar exam in the law library at UNC and betting $1 on who would finish the evidence chapter first. Some relationships accumulate a kind of weight over time that makes them useful in exactly the moments that require weight. He called back at noon. Paul Whitman, Marcus's attorney, had apparently reviewed the IP data and the company registration timeline and had called Franklin back with a different tone than the 6 o'clock call had carried. The company had been registered in Delaware 14 months before Margaret's death. 14 months, not in the weeks after, not in the days surrounding, 14 months before, which meant that while Margaret was still healthy and the diagnosis was still in the future, and the kitchen table planning conversations had not yet happened, Marcus had already created the structure he would use to receive the transfers. He had not been opportunistic. He had been waiting. The 4 transfers on the day of Margaret's funeral had not been a moment of grief-impaired judgment or a desperate decision made in the chaos of loss. They had been the execution of a plan that was 14 months in the making. A plan built while his mother was alive. A plan that required her death to activate. I sat in my kitchen with that information, and I did not say anything for a long time. Then I called Sandra OCA and asked her one question. The question was about the security answers. The transfers had been authorized using my login credentials and my security answers. The security answers are the questions a bank uses to verify identity when something unusual is happening with an account. The questions Margaret and I had set years ago. The answers were personal, specific to our lives. The kind of information that a stranger could not guess, but that a son who had grown up in the house and listened to his parents talk for 43 years might know. The name of the street I grew up on, my mother's maiden name, the city where Margaret and I had our first date. Marcus had known all of them since childhood. Sandra confirmed what I had suspected. The security answers entered during the transfer authorization were correct, all of them. First attempt, no failures, not guessed, known. He had used the knowledge of a son to steal with the precision of a professional. I told Sandra I would need the full documentation of the authorization process for Franklin's civil filing. She had already prepared it. I had been a civil rights attorney for 31 years. I had spent that career in rooms where the gap between what was legal and what was right was the entire territory of the argument. I had sat across from people who had done unconscionable things with complete legal sophistication, and I had found, more often than not, the specific place where the sophistication exceeded the available legal cover. I was not going to be on the wrong side of that gap in my own case. Thursday evening, 6 days after Margaret's funeral, Marcus came to Meadow Creek Drive. He did not call first. He simply came, the way a man comes when he has decided that the conversation he is afraid of is better initiated on his own terms than received on someone else's. He parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a while. I watched from the kitchen window. The same driveway where Margaret had photographed his first day of school in 1988. With a disposable camera she had bought specifically for the occasion, and which she kept in a box in the closet on the second floor, with every other photograph she had ever considered important, organized by year, labeled in her handwriting, that turned slightly to the right when she was being precise about something. He sat in that driveway for 9 minutes. Then he got out and knocked on the door of the house he had grown up in. The house where his bedroom was still painted the color he had chosen at 15, and where the basketball hoop I had installed in 1993 still stood at the edge of the driveway, even though no one had used it in years, because I had decided when Marcus left for college that taking it down would be the wrong kind of goodbye. Franklin had told me this moment would come. He had been specific about what to do when it did. Do not engage the substance of the transfers. Do not express the anger directly. Do not give him anything he can use to construct a narrative of family confusion or grief-impaired communication. Let him talk. Let him build whatever version of this he has prepared. Everything he says is information, and information in a civil matter is always more valuable when it is volunteered. I had spent 31 years teaching younger attorneys that the most powerful thing you can do in any adversarial proceeding is to be quiet and let the other side fill the silence. The other side almost always fills it with more than they intended to give. I opened the door. Marcus looked like a man who had not slept in 6 days, which was the same number of days I had not slept in, but for entirely different reasons. He had dark circles and the particular hollowed quality that stress produces on a person's face, when the stress is the kind that cannot be shared with anyone, because sharing it would require explaining what is causing it. He was alone. No Deja. No, the attorney suggested I bring someone. Just Marcus, on the porch of his parents' house, the way he had come home 1,000 times over 40 years, except that every version of coming home before this one had been different from every definition of what he was arriving at now. Dad, the voice was careful, managed, prepared. I stepped back from the door. He came in. We sat in the living room. Margaret's living room, with her books still on the shelves, in the order she had organized them by subject, and then by author within subject, a system she had implemented in 2007 and maintained with the same rigor she brought to school budgets. Her reading lamp still at the angle she preferred. The small framed photograph of the two of us at Myrtle Beach in 2003, still on the side table where she had put it, because she said it was the most relaxed she had ever seen me look, and she wanted it somewhere she could see it, without having to go looking for it. Marcus looked at that photograph when he sat down. Then he looked away from it, and I watched him look away from it, and I understood something about my son in that moment that I had not understood before. He had not been able to look at it. Whatever architecture he had built around what he had done, whatever justification he had constructed in the 14 months of planning and the 6 days since the funeral, it did not hold in the presence of that photograph. His mother on a beach in 2003, laughing at something I had said, the most relaxed I had ever looked. He looked away, because he could not look at it and still say what he had come to say. "I know Franklin filed," he said. I waited. "I know what this looks like." His hands were flat on his knees. The specific posture of a man trying to hold himself in place through the pressure of his own palms. "Dad, I need you to understand what I was trying to do." The silence asked the question I was not going to ask out loud. "You're going to need help," he said. "Managing the accounts, managing the property, all of it. You don't know the passwords. You don't know the structure of any of it. And without Mom, I know the passwords," I said. He stopped. "Your mother sat with me at that kitchen table for 3 days in October and walked me through every account, every password, every policy, every contact, every single thing. I know all of it." Something moved across his face, a recalibration, the specific expression of a man realizing that the premise of his plan, the foundational assumption on which 14 months of construction had been built, was wrong, that the man he had characterized to himself as requiring management had not required management, had never required management, had simply been trusting enough not to expect what was coming from the person sitting across from him now. "The transfers," he started, "are in Franklin's filing," I said, "along with the IP address data, the company registration documents, and the 14-month timeline between the company's formation and the day of your mother's funeral. Paul Whitman has reviewed all of it. He called Franklin yesterday morning." He went very still. He had not expected me to know about the 14 months. "Marcus," the courtroom voice. Level, precise. The voice that does not carry heat, because heat is what an adversary uses to find the crack. "Your mother called Franklin in October. She moved the most significant portion of the retirement assets into a separate trust before she died. She did it because she saw the same thing in your behavior during those final months that I have been seeing for years, and chose, unlike me, to do something about it before it was too late." The room was very quiet. What she built is intact. What you took from the 4 accounts is the subject of a civil complaint and a federal financial crimes notification. You know this because Paul Whitman knows this. Marcus looked at his hands. "I am going to tell you what happens next," I said. "Not as your father, right now. As a man who spent 31 years in courtrooms and who understands exactly what the documentation supports and what it cannot survive. And then, after I tell you, I am going to make coffee, and you are going to sit here in your mother's living room, and you are going to decide what kind of man you want to be in the next 30 days. Because those 30 days will determine the shape of the rest of your life, more completely than any other 30 days you will ever live. Do you understand me?" He looked up from his hands. His eyes were wet. He nodded once. "I want to stop here for a moment, because this is the place in the story where some of you watching have your own version of what I just described. A moment where you sat across from someone you loved and said the thing that could not be unsaid, and waited to see which direction they chose to fall. If you have that moment in your own life, put it in the comments. Whatever part of it you are ready to say. You do not need names. You do not need the full picture. Just the truest sentence of it. And if you are watching from somewhere in the world that this story has reached, tell me where you are. Drop a comment below. And hit that subscribe button and that like button, so this story keeps finding the people who need to hear it. Now let me tell you what happened in the 30 days. Paul Whitman and Franklin Greer reached a settlement agreement on December 14th, 35 days after Margaret's funeral. The terms are private. I will tell you the shape of them without the numbers, because the numbers belong to the legal record and not to this story. The transferred funds were returned, all of them, from all 4 accounts, plus interest calculated from the date of transfer. The Delaware holding company, Meridian Holdings LLC, was dissolved. A structured repayment arrangement was put in place for the costs associated with Franklin's filing and Sandra Osei's documentation process, and a formal acknowledgement, in writing, signed by Marcus and witnessed by both attorneys, that the transfers had been unauthorized and had constituted fraud, not a mischaracterized family financial matter. Fraud. Paul Whitman had apparently reviewed the 14-month company registration timeline and the IP data, and Margaret's October trust filing, and had advised his client that the documentation was sufficiently comprehensive that the available legal options had narrowed to 1. The federal notification remained on file. No charges were pursued. That decision was mine. And Franklin understood it without requiring me to explain it. Marcus is my son. He is Zora and Eli's father. He is the 17-year-old who came home from his first job with a $20 bill and put it on the kitchen counter and said, "Mom, this is for groceries." He is all of those things at the same time that he is the man who registered a company 14 months in advance and used his mother's death as the activation date. I am still working on how to hold all of those things in the same hand. Margaret's trust is intact. Franklin administers it with the same precision she designed it with, which means she is still, in the specific way that careful people continue to act after they are gone through the structures they leave behind, managing the finances she built for us. I find that both comforting and devastating, depending on the morning. The accounts at First Meridian Bank on Glenwood Avenue are mine again, fully, with new passwords and new security questions whose answers I am not sharing with anyone. Sandra Osei called me in January to confirm everything had been restored and to ask how I was doing. It was the first time in my professional life that a bank manager had asked me that question, and I did not know what to do with it, so I told her the truth, which was that I was managing, which was accurate. The house on Meadow Creek Drive is the house Margaret built over 44 years, and I am still in it. Her reading glasses are still on the counter next to the crossword. The teapot is still on the stove. The photograph from Myrtle Beach is still on the side table in the living room where she put it, because she wanted to see me relaxed every day. I am trying to give her that. Marcus and I have spoken 4 times since December 14th. The conversations have been short and careful, the way conversations are when 2 people are trying to find the path back from something that permanently altered the landscape. I do not know if the path exists yet. I am looking for it with the same patience I applied to cases that took years to move through the system and that required the sustained belief that movement was still possible, even when the evidence in front of you suggested otherwise. Zora and Eli come to Meadow Creek Drive on Saturdays. This was Deja's arrangement, and I am grateful for it, because whatever Marcus did, and whatever Marcus and I are still navigating, Zora and Eli are 9 and 6 years old, and they love their grandmother, and they deserve a grandfather who shows up consistently, and without the shadow of the December settlement, making the air heavy in the room. Zora asked me last Saturday if I missed Grandma Margaret. Every minute, I told her. She thought about that for a moment. Then she said, "I think she can still see us." I told her I thought so too. She went back to the puzzle she was working on at the kitchen table, the one with the pieces that are slightly too large for her hands, but that she refuses to acknowledge as too large, because Zora is Margaret's granddaughter in every way that matters. I stood in the kitchen with my coffee and looked at the shelf where the teapot was. Margaret had called Franklin in October. She had moved the money in October. She had built the wall in October, while I was sitting across from her at the kitchen table thinking we were saying goodbye. She had been building toward Thursday even then, making sure that whatever came after her would not be able to take what she had built for us, making sure the foundation held even after she was no longer there to manage it. She had taken care of everything. Not my son. My wife. 44 years, and she was still protecting us from a hospital bed in October. That is what it means to build something with a person. Not the accounts, not the policies, Not the trust documents Franklin administers on Fayetteville Street. The actual thing. The thing where someone who loves you sees around corners you cannot see around, and builds walls in the places you did not know were exposed, and does it quietly, without fanfare, in the planning weeks, while you are still learning the shape of the world without them. I am still learning it. I expect I will be learning it for the rest of my life. And I expect that is exactly as it should be. Before you go, do something for me. Hit that like button right now before you click away from this page, and subscribe to this channel because there are more stories here. More Margarets who built walls before they left, more accountants and attorneys and bank managers who said come with me and showed someone what needed to be seen, more men sitting in private rooms on Tuesday mornings trying to keep their voices level when the screen in front of them has changed everything, and every one of those stories deserves to be found by the people who need them. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from right now. Your city, your country, your part of the world. And if this story opens something in you, if there is a name, or a number, or a whispered promise in your own life that this story is pressing on, say it below. Say as much of it as you are ready to say. This community will hear it. My name is James Caldwell. I am 69 years old. I was a civil rights attorney for 31 years. And my wife protected me from a hospital bed in October when I did not know protection was what I needed. Thank you for being here until the very end. Scripts developed with AI writing assistance, narrated and produced by our team.